Hello there, good evening and welcome to The World Today on Channels Television. I'm Cynthia Ara. We begin on a different note today right here in Nigeria, and it's actually a very good reason. Nigeria has successfully reduced the number of Ebola cases in the country to 1, and that's been confirmed by the Minister of Health, Onyebuchi Chukwu. As of today, only 1 Ebola patient remains in isolation in Nigeria, down from the 13 cases the country confirmed since the outbreak of the virus back in July. The deadly virus was first brought to Nigeria 38 days ago by a Liberian-American man who's Patrick Sawyer, and he later died, but after health workers who treated him had contracted the virus. Mr. Onyebuchi Chukwu said that so far, there have been 13 cases, including the index case. 5 of those infected died, while 7 have successfully recovered and were discharged. 2 of the nurses who managed Mr. Sawyer were discharged yesterday at the isolation center in Lagos. Now, all the 129 people who were under surveillance have completed the 21-day observation incubation period, and only 1 person was found to be symptomatic and is still being observed. We'll have more news for you concerning the Ebola virus later on in the program, but for now, we now continue in Gaza, where there might be reason to finally rejoice concerning the crisis there, as Egypt has brokered an agreement on a long-term ceasefire between Israel and Palestinian militants in Gaza. The Hamas negotiator Musa Marzouk confirmed the deal to end 7 weeks of fighting that has left more than 2,200 people dead, and it will be announced shortly. The Palestinians said Israel had agreed to ease its blockade of Gaza to allow in aid supplies and building materials. There was no immediate comment from the Israeli government, and the apparent breakthrough came as both sides continued to trade fire. Israeli jets bombed 2 high-rise buildings in Gaza early today, and the Bashar Tower contained flats as well as offices and was flattened. And the Italian complex with homes, shops and offices was also severely damaged in the process. Thankfully, no one was reported killed, as residents managed to flee both buildings after the Israeli military warned them to leave. Hamas, the militant Islamist movement which dominates Gaza, accused Israel of an unprecedented act of revenge against civilians. Well, a group of Russian soldiers captured in eastern Ukraine crossed the border by accident, and that's what Ukraine said about 10 paratroopers who were captured, and has also released video interviews of some of the men. The incident comes as the Ukrainian and Russian leaders hold talks in Belarus. More than 2,000 people have died in months of fighting between Ukrainian forces and separatists in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. The 2 regions declared independence from Kiev following Russia's annexation of the southern Crimean Peninsula from Ukraine back in March. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin are discussing the crisis at today's summit in the Belarusian capital, Minsk. Mr. Putin said the current conflict could not be resolved through further escalation of the use of force and require direct dialogue with the separatists. Meanwhile, Mr. Poroshenko insists that the only way to end the bloodshed and stabilize the region was by establishing effective border controls. Now, despite the treacherous activities on the part of the Islamic State militants in Iraq and Syria, the United States remains committed to conquering them. The U.S. President Barack Obama has now authorized surveillance flights over Syria in order to gain intelligence on the activities of IS, and the Syrian government has given him the go-ahead. This move could mark the first step towards U.S. airstrikes inside of Syria, where the jihadist group controls vast swathes of territory. However, Western governments have so far rejected suggestions that they collaborate with President Bashar al-Assad in an attempt to counter the growing regional threat posed by IS. Mr. Assad has refused to step down since the beginning of the 3.5-year uprising against his rule, in which more than 191,000 people are believed to have been killed.
This morning, Kurdistan President Masoud Barzani confirmed that Iran had supplied weapons and ammunition to Iraqi Kurdish forces fighting Islamic State militants in northern Iraq. However, Tehran has no plans of sending soldiers to the region.
The Iraqi people require assistance, including defense assistance, but not soldiers, as they say, foots on the ground. We do not have any soldiers in Iraq. We don't intend to send soldiers to Iraq. We believe that the Peshmerga in Iraqi Kurdistan, as well as the Iraqi volunteers and regular army, are quite capable of defending their territory.
The Iranian foreign minister is willing to talk to the international community about the conflict with the Sunni IS insurgents who have taken swathes of territory in Syria and northern Iraq. U.S. forces have carried out aerial strikes against IS forces in northern Iraq that have helped Iraqi and Kurdish Peshmerga forces regain the strategic Mosul dam and surrounding area from IS. Zarif said Iranian talks with the U.S. will not go beyond the nuclear issue.
Our talks with the Americans is limited to the nuclear issue, but we are prepared to talk at the international level with other countries and with the international community as a whole, with regard to what is needed to be done in Iraq and in Syria and in this region.
Critics have accused Iraq's outgoing Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki, a Shiite, of fueling the conflict by pursuing a narrowly sectarian agenda that excluded Sunnis from positions of power and influence. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of Syrian refugees who have fled to Arsal, an eastern town in neighboring Lebanon, are now facing harsher living conditions in makeshift shelters, with severe shortage in food and medicine. According to the UN, Arsal is accommodating some 100,000 Syrian refugees, and many are living in randomly erected camps, and with an estimated 12,000 new Syrian refugees entering Lebanon each week, the number is expected to reach 1.5 million by the end of the year, accounting for one-third of the country's population. Abu Mohammed, a Syrian refugee who fled the 3-year-old civil war to seek shelter in Arsal months ago, is among the many having to cope with the difficult conditions, taking care of his family of 10 people that includes 5 children. They are having to live and sleep in a small-sized tent.
We used to live in Syria, but with the breakout of the conflict, bombings were everywhere, just like heavy rains. So I brought my children to Arsal. It's safer here. I've been here for 5 months. I hope countries around the world can help us to return to our homes, because life here is tough.
Besides work, security concerns are also rife in the town, with many Syrian refugee camps in Lebanon targeted by the Lebanese army following fierce clashes that have erupted between the army and extremist groups in the town in early August. On August the 2nd, the Lebanese army then engaged in a fierce battle with Islamic State fighters based in Syria in Arsal. At least 18 soldiers were killed, 86 others wounded, as 39 soldiers and internal security troops were kidnapped in the violence.